I stand in the corner of my childhood bedroom, watching my sister Meredith try on her third wedding dress of the day. The ivory silk cascades around her like liquid moonlight, and for a moment she looks exactly like the fairy tale princess she's always believed herself to be. Mom circles her with pins between her teeth, adjusting the hemline with the same precision she once used to bandage our scraped knees. This should be a beautiful moment. Sisters bonding over wedding preparations, family coming together to celebrate love and new beginnings. Instead, my stomach churns with the weight of what I discovered 3 weeks ago. The truth that's been eating away at me every single day since I accidentally opened that text message on her phone. Let me take you back to where this all began, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about a wedding falling apart. It's about lies so carefully constructed they fooled everyone for months. It's about betrayal that runs deeper than family bonds. And it's about the moment when staying silent became impossible, even when speaking up would destroy everything. My name is Rachel, and I'm 26 years old. Meredith is my older sister by 3 years, and she's always been the golden child in our family. While I struggled through college working 2 part-time jobs, Meredith sailed through her marketing degree with our parents' full financial support. When I finally landed my first real job as a graphic designer, barely making ends meet in a tiny studio apartment, Meredith was already climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious firm downtown. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. Or at least, I thought I did before everything unraveled. Growing up, she was my protector, my role model, the person I wanted to become when I finally figured out how to be an adult. She had this magnetic personality that drew people in, this confidence that made everyone around her feel like they were part of something special. That's probably why nobody questioned it when she started dating Marcus 2 years ago. Marcus Chen, the successful attorney with the corner office and the spotless reputation. He was everything our parents had always hoped one of their daughters would bring home. Intelligent, ambitious, financially stable, and completely devoted to Meredith. I liked Marcus immediately. He had this quiet strength about him, this way of listening when you talked that made you feel heard. He remembered details about conversations from months earlier, always asked about my latest design projects, and never made me feel like the struggling younger sister when we all got together for family dinners. When they got engaged last Christmas, the whole family celebrated like we'd won the lottery. Mom immediately started planning what she called the wedding of the century. Dad opened his checkbook without hesitation, something he'd never done for any of my milestones. Even I got caught up in the excitement, spending hours helping Meredith research venues and photographers and florists. Marcus seemed genuinely happy, though I noticed he often looked overwhelmed by the scale of the celebrations Mom was orchestrating. Whenever smile and say I asked him about it, he just wanted whatever made Meredith happy. That should have been romantic. Looking back now, I realize it was resignation. The first crack in the perfect facade appeared about 6 months ago, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Meredith started working late more often, missing family dinners and weekend plans. She'd always been ambitious, so nobody questioned her dedication to her career. She talked about a major client she was wooing, high-stakes presentations that could make or break her trajectory at the firm. Marcus began showing up to family events alone more frequently. He'd explain that Meredith was tied up with work, and we all accepted it because that's what you do when someone you love is chasing their dreams. He never complained, never expressed frustration. If anything, he seemed proud of her success. But I started noticing small things. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. How he'd check his phone constantly during dinner, then put it away with a slight frown. The fact that he and Meredith rarely touched when they were together, like they were performing intimacy rather than feeling it. 3 weeks ago, everything changed. Meredith had asked me to house sit while she and Marcus went to look at potential honeymoon destinations. She'd left her backup phone charging on the kitchen counter, the old one she used for work calls when her primary battery died. I wasn't snooping. I want to make that absolutely clear because what happened next has haunted me every single day since. I was making coffee when the phone buzzed with a text notification. The screen lit up, and I glanced over automatically, the way you do when any device makes a sound in a quiet room. The message preview made me freeze with my coffee mug halfway to my lips. It was from someone named David, and the first line was visible on the lock screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. Marcus is working late again, right?" My hands started trembling so badly I had to set the mug down. I stared at that phone for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Every rational part of my brain told me to walk away, to pretend I hadn't seen anything, to give my sister the benefit of the doubt, but I couldn't stop myself from picking up the phone. The messages were right there, and once I started reading, I couldn't stop. Months of conversations unfolded before my eyes. Intimate messages, plans for secret meetings, complaints about having to maintain the charade of her engagement. The worst part wasn't just that Meredith was having an affair. It was how she talked about Marcus in those messages. She called him boring, predictable, a safety net she wasn't ready to give up. She laughed about how easy it was to fool him, how his trust made the deception almost too simple. David, whoever he was, seemed to be pushing her to end the engagement. His messages grew more frustrated over time, asking when she was going to stop playing games and choose him instead. Her responses made it clear that she had no intention of leaving Marcus before the wedding. The financial security was too appealing, the social status too important. I spent the next hour reading through months of evidence, my heart breaking a little more with each message. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake she'd made once and regretted. This was a calculated deception that had been going on for almost the entire length of their engagement. When Meredith and Marcus returned from their trip that evening, glowing with excitement about the resort they'd chosen for their honeymoon, I felt physically sick. Marcus showed me pictures on his phone, talking about the private beach and the couple's spa treatments they'd booked. His happiness was so genuine, so complete, that I had to excuse myself to the bathroom before I said something I'd regret. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the most impossible decision I'd ever faced. Do I tell Marcus what I know and destroy his world? Do I confront Meredith and give her a chance to come clean? Do I stay silent and let him marry someone who's been betraying him for months? The easy answer would be to mind my own business. Family loyalty runs deep, and Meredith has always been the star of our family constellation. Mom and Dad would be devastated if the wedding fell apart. The deposits were already paid, the invitations sent, the future they'd all been dreaming about, carefully planned down to the smallest detail. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's face as he talked about their honeymoon plans. The way his voice softened when he mentioned how happy Meredith seemed lately. The trust in his eyes when he looked at her, complete and unquestioning. How do you let someone you care about walk into a marriage built on lies? How do you stand by and watch as they promise their life to someone who's been systematically deceiving them? But how do you destroy a family by revealing a truth that will hurt everyone involved? For 2 weeks, I carried that knowledge like a physical weight. Every family dinner became an exercise in acting normal, while my sister played the role of devoted fiancé. Every conversation about wedding details felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Marcus would ask my opinion about flowers or music or seating arrangements, and I'd have to smile and give advice while knowing that none of it mattered because the foundation of their relationship was built on sand. The breaking point came last Tuesday night. We were all gathered for what Mom called a final family planning session before the big day. Marcus had brought a bottle of champagne to celebrate finishing the last of the wedding preparations. As he raised his glass to toast Meredith, calling her the love of his life and thanking our family for welcoming him with such open arms, I felt something inside me snap. I excused myself from the table and went to my car, where I sat in the dark parking lot of my parents' driveway, and finally made the decision that would change everything. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep, no matter how much pain the truth might cause. Next morning, I called Marcus and asked if we could meet for coffee. Just the two of us, away from family and wedding chaos. He agreed immediately, probably thinking I wanted to talk about some last-minute detail or share some sisterly advice about married life. When I saw him walk into the coffee shop, looking relaxed and happy in his weekend clothes, I almost lost my nerve. This was going to destroy him. But letting him marry Meredith without knowing the truth would destroy him even more slowly, day by day, year by year. What happened next will stay with me for the rest of my life. I sat across from Marcus in that small corner booth, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had long gone cold. The morning sunlight streamed through the window beside us, casting everything in a deceptively cheerful glow that felt wrong given what I was about to do. Marcus stirred his latte absently, chatting about how relieved he was that all the wedding planning stress was finally behind them. He mentioned how excited Meredith seemed about the honeymoon, how she'd been glowing with happiness lately. Each word felt like a physical blow. I took a deep breath and interrupted him mid-sentence. Marcus, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be difficult to hear. His smile faded immediately. The easy contentment in his expression shifted to concern, then wariness. He set down his spoon with careful precision, giving me his full attention in that focused way that had always made him such a good friend. What is it, Rachel? His voice was gentle, but I could hear the underlying tension. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking slightly as I opened the screenshots I'd taken of Meredith's messages. I'd spent hours the night before deciding how to handle this moment. Should I ease into it gradually? Try to soften the blow somehow? In the end, I realized there was no gentle way to destroy someone's world. 3 weeks ago, I accidentally saw some text messages on Meredith's work phone. I slid the device across the table toward him. Marcus. She's been having an affair for months. The color drained from his face so quickly, I thought he might faint. He stared at the phone like it was a snake that might strike him, not touching it, not moving at all. What are you talking about? His voice came out as barely more than a whisper. I watched him pick up the phone with trembling fingers and start reading. The transformation was heartbreaking to witness. With each message, his shoulders sagged a little more. His breathing became shallow and rapid. At one point, he had to stop reading entirely and just sit there, staring at nothing. The silence stretched between us for what felt like hours. Other customers chatted and laughed around us, completely oblivious to the fact that a man's entire future was crumbling at table 7. How long have you known? He finally asked, his voice hollow. 3 weeks. I've been trying to figure out what to do, whether I should tell you or talk you to her first. I decide deserve to know the truth. He scrolled through more messages, his jaw tightening with each revelation. When he reached the ones where Meredith called him boring and predictable, I saw something die in his eyes. She's been planning to go through with the wedding anyway, he said, more to himself than to me, even while she's been with this other guy. I nodded, unable to find words that wouldn't make everything worse. Marcus set the phone down and buried his face in his hands. For a moment, I thought he might cry, but when he looked up again, his expression had hardened into something I'd never seen before. The gentle, trusting man I'd known for 2 years was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. Who else knows about this? He asked. Just me. And obviously, whoever this David person is. He picked up the phone again and continued reading, his movements mechanical and precise. I could practically see his legal training kicking in, compartmentalizing the emotional devastation so he could focus on gathering facts. The wedding is in 5 days, he said eventually. I know. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. He looked at me with something that might have been gratitude mixed with profound sadness. Thank you for telling me. I know this couldn't have been easy. We sat in that coffee shop for another hour while Marcus processed everything. He asked questions about when I'd discovered the messages, whether I thought other family members might know, how long I thought the affair had been going on. His analytical approach to his own heartbreak was both admirable and devastating to watch. Finally, he stood up and gathered his jacket. "I need to go home and think about how to handle this," he said. "Will you do me a favor and not say anything to your family yet? I want to confront Meredith first. Give her a chance to explain." I agreed, though part of me wondered if that was wise. Meredith had proven herself capable of elaborate deception. Who knew what story she might spin when cornered? That was Tuesday morning. For the rest of the week, I felt like I was living in some alternate reality where everyone around me continued planning for a wedding that I knew would never happen. Mom fussed over last-minute details. Dad practiced his father of the bride speech. Relatives called to confirm their travel arrangements. Meredith seemed completely normal, if anything more radiant than usual. She floated through those final pre-wedding days like she was walking on air, completely oblivious to the fact that her world was about to implode. I found myself studying her face during family dinners, looking for any sign of guilt or anxiety. There was nothing. Her performance was flawless. The confrontation happened on Thursday night, exactly 24 hours before the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't there, but Marcus called me afterward and told me everything. He'd gone to Meredith's apartment with printouts of all the messages. No ambush, no dramatic scene, just a quiet request that she explain what he'd discovered. According to Marcus, she'd tried to deny everything at first, claiming the messages were fake or taken out of context. But the evidence was overwhelming. Months of intimate conversations, photos they'd sent each other, detailed plans for secret meetings. When she realized denial wasn't working, she'd switched tactics and tried to minimize the importance of the affair. "It didn't mean anything," she told him. "David is just someone I work with. It's not serious. I love you, Marcus. I want to marry you." Marcus had listened to all of it with the same analytical detachment he'd shown in the coffee shop. Then he'd asked her a single question that cut through all her explanations and excuses. "If it doesn't mean anything, why have you been lying to me for months?" She couldn't answer that. How do you explain away a betrayal that's systematic and deliberate? How do you justify months of calculated deception with someone you claim to love? The engagement was over by Thursday midnight. Marcus called off the wedding with less than 48 hours to spare. The next morning, our family woke up to a phone call that changed everything. Mom answered, and I could hear her voice rising in panic from my bedroom down the hall. "What do you mean the wedding is off? What happened?" "Marcus, slow down. I can't understand you." I got dressed quickly and rushed to my parents' house, where I found complete chaos. Mom was crying hysterically while trying to call vendors and cancel arrangements. Dad was pacing the living room, muttering about deposits and embarrassment and how they were going to explain this to 200 guests. And Meredith? Meredith was nowhere to be found. She'd left town sometime during the night, according to the note she'd left on her kitchen counter. "Gone to stay with friends while she figured things out," the note said. "Needed space to think and time to heal from this misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. That's what she called months of systematic betrayal and lies. The next few hours were a blur of FRD, damageantic phone calls, and control. Vendors had to be contacted, guests had to be notified, deposits had to be written off as total losses. The elegant wedding venue had to be canceled. The flowers, the cake, the photographer, the band, everything had to be undone in a matter of hours. Marcus handled his part with the same methodical precision he brought to his legal work. He called his family first, then his groomsmen, then started working through the guest list alphabetically. His voice remained steady and professional through every conversation, as if he was canceling a business meeting rather than the most important day of his life. But I could see the cracks in his composure, the way his hand shook slightly when he thought no one was looking, the hollow expression in his eyes when he had to explain for the 20th time that the wedding was off due to circumstances beyond his control. My parents were devastated, but their devastation was mixed with fury at Meredith for putting them in this position. The social embarrassment alone was crushing for them. Having to call friends and extended family to uninvite them to their daughter's wedding felt like the ultimate humiliation. It was Dad who finally asked the question everyone was thinking, but nobody wanted to voice. How did Marcus find out about the affair? The room went silent. Marcus looked at me across my parents' living room, and I saw something like gratitude in his expression again. He could have thrown me under the bus, made me the villain in this story for being the messenger who brought unwelcome news. Instead, he simply said that he discovered evidence of Meredith's infidelity and couldn't go through with marrying someone who had been deceiving him. He didn't mention my role in the revelation, and I realized he was protecting me from my family's potential anger. But Mom wasn't satisfied with vague explanations. She pressed for details, wanting to know exactly what Marcus had found and how he'd found it. The lawyer in him kicked in again, and he calmly laid out the facts without emotion or embellishment. The text messages spanning months, the intimate photos, the detailed plans for secret meetings, the conversations where Meredith had called him boring and predictable while planning to take his money and social status through marriage. By the time he finished, my parents looked like they'd been physically struck. This wasn't just a moment of the weakness or a single mistake. This was evidence of a person they didn't recognize, someone capable of sustained deception and manipulation. That's when I made my second impossible decision of the week. I stood up in my parents' living room and told them the truth about how Marcus had discovered Meredith's betrayal. I told them everything. How I'd seen the message preview on Meredith's work phone. How I'd made the choice to read through months of conversations. How I'd wrestled with the decision to tell Marcus for 3 agonizing weeks before finally meeting him at that coffee shop. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom stared at me like I was a stranger, her tear-streaked face cycling through confusion, hurt, and something that looked like betrayal. Dad's expression was unreadable, but I could see the wheels turning as he processed what I'd just admitted. You knew for 3 weeks? Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. You knew your sister was having an affair, and you said nothing to us? I tried to find the right words to explain the impossible position I'd been in. How do you tell your parents that their golden child is capable of such calculated deception? How do you destroy a family's dreams when you're not even sure what the right thing to do is? I didn't know what to do, I said, my voice cracking under the weight of their stares. I kept hoping Meredith would come clean on her own, or that maybe I was misunderstanding something. But when I saw how happy Marcus was about the wedding, how much he trusted her, I couldn't let him walk into that marriage blind, Marcus said quietly, stepping into the conversation. Rachel did the right thing. It couldn't have been easy for her to tell me, but I'm grateful she did. Mom turned on him with a fury I'd never seen before. The right thing? The right thing would have been coming to us first. This is a family matter, not something to be handled by outsiders. The word outsiders hit Marcus like a slap. After 2 years of being treated like family, after being welcomed into every holiday and celebration, he was suddenly an outsider again. I watched his face harden as the reality of his situation truly sank in. Dad finally spoke, his voice heavy with exhaustion. What's done is done. The wedding is canceled, the deposits are lost, and we have 200 people to call before they show up at a church tomorrow expecting to see a ceremony that isn't going to happen. Over the next several hours, our house became a crisis management center. Phone calls were made, explanations were given, arrangements were canceled. I helped where I could, but mostly I felt like a ghost haunting the edges of the disaster I'd helped create. Marcus left around noon, saying he needed to handle his own family's questions and concerns. Before he walked out the door, he found me in the kitchen and squeezed my shoulder gently. Thank you, he said simply. I know this is hard for you too. After he left, Mom confronted me directly. She'd been holding back her full fury while Marcus was there, but now the floodgates opened. How could you do this to your own sister? She demanded, her voice shaking with rage. Whatever problems Meredith and Marcus had, they should have worked them out between themselves. You had no right to interfere. She was lying to him, Mom, for months. She was planning to marry him while carrying on an affair with someone else. How is that something they could work out? But Mom wasn't interested in the logic of my position. In her mind, I'd betrayed family loyalty in the worst possible way. I'd chosen an outsider over my own blood, and nothing else mattered. Your sister made mistakes, she said, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. But marriages survive infidelity all the time. You robbed them of the chance to work through this together. I stared at her in disbelief. Work through what together? Meredith wasn't trying to work through anything. She was planning to continue the affair after the wedding. She was using Marcus for financial security while getting her emotional needs met somewhere else. You don't know that, Mom snapped. You read some text messages out of context and jumped to the worst possible conclusions. The gaslighting was breathtaking. I'd seen months of evidence with my own eyes, but somehow I was the one who had misunderstood the situation. Somehow Meredith was the victim here, and I was the villain who had destroyed her happiness. Dad tried to play peacemaker, suggesting that everyone was upset and maybe we should take some time to cool down before saying things we'd regret. But the damage was already done. The battle lines had been drawn, and I found myself on the wrong side of them. That evening, after the last vendor had been called and the final guest had been notified, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom and finally let myself cry. Not just for Marcus, whose world I'd helped destroy, but for my family, which would never be the same. For Meredith, who had thrown away something precious for cheap thrills. For my parents, whose dreams for their daughter's perfect wedding had crumbled into embarrassment and social awkwardness. Meredith finally called on Sunday, 3 days after she disappeared. I wasn't part of that conversation, but I could hear Mom's side of it from the living room. Lots of soothing sounds and reassurances that everything would be that this okay was all just a terrible misunderstanding that could be fixed. When Mom hung up, she found me in the kitchen and delivered Meredith's message with icy precision. Your sister wants you to know that you've destroyed the best thing that ever happened to her. She says Marcus would never have found out about her private life if you hadn't violated her privacy and betrayed her trust. Private life. That's what she was calling months of systematic deception and adultery. She also wants you to know that David has ended things with her because he can't handle the drama you've created. So congratulations, Rachel. You've successfully ruined 2 relationships. The manipulation was masterful. Somehow, Meredith had managed to position herself as the victim of my betrayal rather than the architect of her own downfall. The fact that her affair partner had abandoned her when things got complicated wasn't evidence of his poor character or her bad judgment. It was my fault for creating drama. I wanted to argue, to point out the fundamental flaws in this logic, but I could see that Mom had already chosen her side. In her mind, a family loyalty trumped everything else, including basic honesty and moral integrity. The next few weeks were a special kind of hell. Word of the canceled wedding spread through our social circle like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know what had happened, and since Meredith wasn't talking and Marcus was maintaining diplomatic silence, people began to speculate. Some of the speculation was surprisingly close to the truth. Others created elaborate alternative theories involving financial problems, family feuds, or cold feet. The uncertainty made everything worse, turning our family's private crisis into public entertainment. I found myself completely isolated within my own family. Mom barely spoke to me except when absolutely necessary. Dad tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes every time he looked at me. Extended family members who heard garbled versions of events began treating me with cool politeness, instead of the warm affection I'd always known. Meredith eventually returned to town, but she didn't come home. Instead, she moved in with a friend across the city and began what Mom called her healing process. I wasn't invited to participate in any of it. The few times I saw her during those weeks, she looked terrible. The radiant glow that had carried her through the final wedding preparations was gone, replaced by dark circles under her eyes and a hollow expression that made her look years older. Part of me felt sorry for her. Whatever else she'd done, Losing Marcus and David in the same week had clearly devastated her. But then I'd remember those text messages. The casual way she dismissed Marcus as boring and predictable while planning to take advantage of his love and trust, and my sympathy would evaporate. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed to be handling the aftermath better than anyone had expected. He'd taken a week off work immediately after canceling the wedding, but when he returned, he threw himself into his cases with renewed focus. Friends said he seemed different, more serious and less trusting. But professionally, he was performing at the highest level of his career. He called me once during those first few weeks, just to check in and see how I was holding up under the family pressure. His concern for my well-being, given everything he was dealing with, almost brought me to tears. "I'm okay," I lied, not wanting to add my problems to his burden. "No, you're not," he said gently. "I can hear it in your voice. This isn't your fault, Rachel. You did the right thing, even though it was hard." Those words meant more to me than he could possibly know. In a world where everyone else seemed to think I'd made a terrible mistake, having one person validate my choice felt like a lifeline. The breaking point with my family came about a month after the canceled wedding. Meredith had agreed to come to Sunday dinner for the first time since everything fell apart, and Mom had made it clear that this was my opportunity to apologize and begin making things right. I spent the entire week dreading that dinner, knowing that I couldn't apologize for something I still believed was the right thing to do. But I also knew that refusing to apologize would probably end my relationship with my family permanently. When Sunday arrived, I sat around that familiar dining room table and watched Meredith play the role of wounded victim with Academy Award-worthy skill. She talked about how betrayed she felt, how violated her privacy had been, how difficult it was to rebuild her life after having it destroyed by someone she trusted. Mom and Dad nodded sympathetically, offering comfort and support while shooting expectant looks in my direction. This was my cue to grovel, to beg forgiveness for my terrible betrayal of family loyalty. Instead, I asked a simple question that changed everything. "Meredith, do you think Marcus deserved to know the truth before he married you?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Everyone at the dinner table froze, forks suspended halfway to mouths, glasses paused mid-sip. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to stop ticking. Meredith's face went through a series of micro-expressions. Surprise, then calculation, then something that looked almost like panic before settling into cold fury. She set down her fork with deliberate precision, the sound sharp against Mom's good china. "That's not the point," she said, voice tight with controlled anger. "The point is that you violated my privacy and destroyed my relationship." "But it is the point," I pressed, feeling something unlock inside my chest. "You were about to marry someone while actively betraying him. You called him boring and predictable in those messages. You laughed about how easy it was to fool him." Mom's hand flew to her throat, that nervous gesture she'd had since we were children. Dad cleared his throat, the sound like gravel in the sudden silence. "Marcus loved you completely," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "He trusted you without question. He was planning a future with someone who was systematically lying to him. Did he deserve that?" Meredith's mask finally slipped. The wounded victim facade cracked, revealing something harder and more calculating underneath. For just a moment, I saw the person who had written those messages, the one who had compartmentalized her life into neat little boxes without caring about the collateral damage. "You don't understand adult relationships," she snapped. "Marriage is complicated. People have needs that can't always be met by one person. So you were planning to keep seeing David after the wedding?" The silence that followed that question stretched so long, I thought the world had stopped spinning. Meredith's eyes darted between Mom and Dad, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Her silence was answer enough. 2 years have passed since that Sunday dinner imploded. Marcus moved to Seattle, started fresh with a law firm there. He sent me a Christmas card last year with a photo of him and someone new, a woman with kind eyes and an honest smile. He looked genuinely happy for the first time since I'd known him. Meredith eventually married David, though the fairy tale ending she'd imagined never materialized. Turns out someone willing to help you cheat on your fiancé isn't exactly husband material. Who could have predicted that? My relationship with my parents remains strained but slowly healing. They've begun to understand that protecting someone from the consequences of their actions isn't the same as loving them. It's taken time, but they've started to see that truth, even painful truth, is a gift worth giving. Some people ask if I regret speaking up, if destroying my family's perfect wedding was worth it. The answer is simple. Marcus deserved to know who he was marrying before he promised his life to her. Everyone deserves that basic honesty from the person they love. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. But living with the truth is still better than building a life on someone else's lies.